For centuries, some of the most powerful and insightful voices in early Buddhism have been almost completely silent. We're talking about philosophers, meditation masters, brilliant teachers whose stories were just kind of lost to history. Well, today we're going to bring those voices back into the light. And we're diving deep into the source material for this, a book called Daughters of the Buddha, which is a collection of teachings from these very women, the first female disciples. So this isn't some modern take. These are their actual words, saved for thousands of years in ancient texts, just waiting for us to find them again.
And that really brings up a huge question, right? These women reached the absolute highest states of enlightenment. Kings celebrated their wisdom. Their courage was the stuff of legends. So why have their stories been kind of pushed to the side? Like a footnote in history? Well, the answer starts when you understand what they were really up against.
Turns out their biggest challenge wasn't just what society threw at them. It was a deeply personal, psychological battle. And that battle is personified by a figure who shows up over and over again in their stories, the tempter, Mara. Now, Mara isn't just some cartoon devil with a pitchfork. Think of him as the voice of every single obstacle you could face. He's that external prejudice telling you that you can't do something. He's that tempting distraction that pulls you off your path. And, maybe most importantly, he's the voice of your own inner, crippling self-doubt. And you see this prejudice clear as day in the story of the nun Soma. She's deep in meditation, and Mara pops up to taunt her with this insult. Two-finger intelligence. That was a common put-down back then. It basically meant a woman's wisdom was only good for running a kitchen. He's telling her point-blank that because she's a woman, enlightenment is impossible. But Soma's comeback is just absolutely devastating. She doesn't argue. She doesn't get defensive. She just slices right through his nonsense with pure logic. She's like, what does my body have to do with my mind? If you have insight, you have insight, period. It is a total mic drop moment right there in the ancient scripture.
And in that one exchange, Soma proves it. She proves that liberation, enlightenment, it's all a mental and spiritual game. It has absolutely nothing to do with your body or your social status. It's about freedom of the mind, and that's accessible to literally anyone.
Okay, so that's the what of their defiance. But the next big question is, how? How did they develop that kind of mental armor? Well, their strength came from mastering some very specific mental tools and techniques. The answer is in their training. They didn't just sit around and hope to be strong, they actively cultivated it. They relied on this systematic path of mental training that's right at the heart of Buddhist practice.
And a huge piece of this training is this deep, systematic mindfulness practice, broken down into 4 stages. It's like a progressive workout for your brain. First, you start with the body, just observing your breath, getting grounded. Then you move on to your feelings, learning to watch them come and go without getting swept away. Third, you watch the mind itself, seeing thoughts as just events, not orders you have to follow. And finally, you contemplate reality itself, seeing how everything is connected.
And they had this fantastic metaphor for this whole process, especially for that third step of just watching your thoughts. They said calming your mind isn't about forcing thoughts to go away. It's more like making a cup of Turkish coffee. You just let the swirling grounds, the dregs, all those busy thoughts, you just let them naturally settle to the bottom. And what's left isn't an empty mind, it's a clear one. And the result of this kind of training wasn't just being calm and centered. It led to this incredible philosophical insight, the kind that could tackle the biggest questions of the day. And that brings us to the nun Kema, who is famous for her wisdom.
So a king comes up to her with one of the great head-scratchers of the era. What happens to a fully enlightened person, like a Buddha, after they die? This was a question that had stumped all the greatest thinkers, and even the Buddha himself often wouldn't answer it directly.
See, back then, in ancient Indian philosophy, people figured there were only 4 possible answers to this question. Either an enlightened being exists after death, or they don't, or they both exist and don't exist, or they neither exist nor don't exist. But Kema knew that picking any of these was like walking right into a trap, because every single one of them assumes there's a permanent self to begin with. But Kema's response, man, is just brilliant. Instead of answering, she flips the question back at the king. She asks him if he could measure all the water in the ocean. And he's like, no, of course not. It's immeasurable. And she says, an enlightened being is just like that ocean. Deep, immeasurable, profound. Her point? The king's question was like asking, how many gallons are in the ocean? The very tool he was using, to measure, the idea of a fixed self, was totally wrong for the job.
She didn't answer his question. She showed him it was the wrong question to even ask.
So when you step back and look at the whole picture, you see that these women weren't just followers. They were innovators and incredibly deep thinkers. And they left behind a legacy that is just as powerful today as it was 2,500 years ago. And the takeaways from their lives are just so clear and relevant. First, they proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that spiritual mastery has nothing to do with gender. Second, they showed how a trained mind can conquer anything, whether it's prejudice from the outside or doubt from the inside. The ancient practices they mastered, still timeless tools for mental clarity. And of course, their stories continue to be this incredible source of inspiration. So really, we have to remember them not just as students of the Buddha, but as masters in their own right. They were total trailblazers who carved out a path for millions, and they were brilliant teachers whose words still reign with so much wisdom.
Hearing their voices again after all this time is just such a powerful reminder that amazing wisdom can get overlooked for centuries. And it leaves us with one final thought, right? What other forgotten knowledge is out there just waiting for us to find it again?